Good morning. Good morning. We'll call the Wednesday morning, December 15th, 2021 meeting in the Criminal Justice Committee to order. Start with roll call, please.
Mr. Hess?
Present.
Mr. Long?
Present.
Mr. Lear?
Present.
Mr. Snipes? Ms. Peters? Ms. Parker?
Present.
Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Carrico?
Present.
Mr. Eckhoff? Mr. Swanson? Mr. Kirkstra?
Present.
Mr. Hunter?
Present.
Mr. Collins?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Present.
Mr. Gowler? Mr. Wheeler? Mr. Steroy? We have a quorum.
Mr. Fairfield is here.
Mr. Fairfield?
Here.
I have no request for public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Any public comment? Going on to the approval of the minutes of November 10th, 2021. Take a motion. Mr. Hunter, second by Mr. Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I do not see the chief judge here this morning. Up next is Ms. Cianci. In your package you have a copy of the monthly report. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Fairfield, second by Ms. Parker. Good morning, Sandy.
Oops. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. For the collection report of Harris & Harris, we've sent over this year so far 2,368 cases, which is about 500 more than we did last year. So that's pretty good. For the local debt recovery program report in Harris & Harris, we collected 42,526, which is a jump from October and September and August. Gosh, all the way through to, so July, August, and September were less than November, which I find interesting because on my next report is the state's attorney collection report. We only collected 1,825. When this email went around, we discussed the fact that now that the driver's licenses, they took back the carrot that we used to use. They had to pay their fines before they could get the releases to go to the Secretary of State to get their tickets, get their driver's license back. And that was wiped away this last year, so that's why we have the large drop off. The state Secretary of State had to clean off all of their computers, so the governor made the ruling that you didn't need to have to pay your tickets to be licensed to drive. So that's why we're reducing a lot of the money here. And then my regular disbursement report. If there's any questions about any of that, that's just my normal report of what we do for the month.
Any questions or comments on the report? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Copy machine.
Yeah, so I didn't know the whole plan about what was going on with all the copy machines and how we were switching over to a different company. And my main, excuse me, my main copier in the main office, which has been out of service more in the last probably 6 months than it's been in service, was not a part of the package that everybody approved for all the other departments. Oh, there's Andy, so he can help me explain this. So this copy machine, because the other copy machine that we have is still under the other service agreement with the other people, which we don't have that service agreement anymore. So from my understanding, am I right, Andy?
It still exists for that one machine, but you can't get anybody to ever call you back from that company.
No, you can't. And when we do the service call, it'd be over 2 weeks that it would be off while we're waiting for someone to come. So it's not been helpful. So that's what we're bringing this to this board now.
Is this for ARPA funds to go in with the other ones?
That it's eligible just like the rest of them are. Did beyond after our conversation, did you talk with Steve and see if we can get it added to the?
Yes.
Okay, and so
Yeah.
he's
He's
not
all-
here. That's why I turned around and looked to see
Yeah.
if he was here to let you all know that he could add it.
Yeah.
So we'll know that by the time finance comes.
Correct.
I think it can be. I don't think it's a problem, but we need to get that in writing from the vendor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need a motion to approve this from this committee, or just go straight to finance?
Recommend to finance maybe, if you so choose.
Would that be the committee's response? Recommend it to finance? Okay,
Perfect. Thank
very
you.
good. Anything else for us?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
State's Attorney's Office. In your package, you have a copy of the State's Attorney's Grand Jury Report and the Grand Jury Statistics Report. I would take a motion to combine and approve that. Mr. Long, second by Mr. Kirkstra. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Comments on your report?
Not really. I do have comments on the resolution, though.
Okay.
If there's,
Hang on 1 second here.
Sure.
We have any questions for Mr.
questions?
Coughlin on the report? Mr. Hunter.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Coughlin, I had a conversation with Jim recently. How many prosecutors are you down?
I think right now about 3.
Now, he told me 7. But I was just,
Well, I would defer to Mr. Rowe, as I'm not over in that building all the time.
and how many, who's gone on to be judges now? You got
Nancy Nicholson is now a judge. Brenda Claudio is now a judge. Actually, I discount them. Well, I don't discount them, they're judges, but then Erica Parsons now has gone to the appellate court. We lost, last year we lost Clyde Guglielmo, Mark Laws, who else?
maybe that's where he
more.
got the 7 or
Yeah.
something.
Mr. Hunter, just a second. We're discussing the report right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and then we
Yes,
get
sir,
that in
any
under the resolution and everything, okay? Any questions on the reports, the grand jury report or the grand jury statistics report? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, Mr. Hunter, go ahead with your questions.
Okay, you wrapped me across my knuckles.
Well, I'm sorry, but
No problem. You didn't said any questions, and I just, yeah, maybe when you were articulating those names and stuff, maybe that's what he was referring to.
Right, well, going back in time, yes, that's correct. And we I know we've had a problem. We've had ads out for new attorneys and haven't had a lot of response. I know Jim has reached out to neighboring neighboring counties and state's attorneys' offices to see if that's something where they've had a lot of responses. They're largely in the same issues that we have had with that. Also with we have an authorization as to how many people we have. The main reason that we're doing going up to 19 is that since we have additional funds, we're getting an ARPA state's attorney who's going to be instrumental in funneling and vetting the ARPA funds. So that's the main. We just need to have that additional attorneys authorized so that we'd be able to fill those spots.
Thank you.
Anything else?
okay, anything else? Okay, now go on to your resolution, sir.
Well, our resolution is that we're currently authorized to have 17 attorneys. In order to have our full complement of attorneys, we need to add 2 additional attorneys. The purpose of the resolution that we're asking that you pass on is to authorize that the office go to 19 full-time state's attorneys.
Mr. Wheeler first.
By statute, we have to set the number of state's attorneys in the office, and even though these are, we'll call them flex attorneys for better words, that until we're done with the ARPA process and they're caught up here in a couple years, that's why they're adding the 2, one for us, one for them. And if I'm working on something where it may not be a full-timer, it'd be like a per-hour situation for us, it'd be a lot cheaper. But I think it still has to be covered under that, because
Right,
they
we
would have to be appointed.
still have to authorize
Yeah,
it.
still have to authorize it and appoint it, so.
Okay. Before we get in discussion, let's get a motion to approve this.
Well, I think there's a misprint here in the resolution. Should it say currently 19 and then move to?
Use the microphone, Jake, please.
I believe the resolution says we're currently at 19. It should say we're currently at 17 and moving to 19. Didn't you say we're currently deemed
Currently it's
17? It says, whereas there are currently 19 assistants.
Deemed necessary.
Okay.
Right, deemed
I didn't know
necessary.
if that's what we were at.
Yeah,
If
no.
it was just a misprint.
No, we have 17.
Gotcha.
A new evaluation of what we need to do. We need 19, and that's the purpose.
Okay. Mr. Snipes, you're making a motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Snipes, second by Mr. Lear. Okay, now let's get in discussion. Mr. Snipes.
Good morning. With that, I know that the state covers a majority portion, I believe it is, of those salaries. What percentage of that is attributed to the county?
You know,
And
Mr.
what is the cost of this addition, the two additions?
Actually, the vast majority of it, I think, is going to come from the county. The main funding from the state comes for the state's attorney.
Just the state's attorney.
Okay, so these two will be coming from the county?
Right.
Okay, and the cost to the county, do we know?
I don't know that as I'm sitting here
Zero?
right now. It depends on what the salaries would be, Mr. Sniper.
Zero. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Wheeler.
It's just mentioned, it's COVID money, it's ARPA money, so it's zero cost to the local taxpayers. Even the benefits, that we can't do pension. That's the one thing
right.
we can't do, is pension. That's the only thing that it would cost, so it's not zero. I apologize. It's our pension match and that's it. The rest of
Okay.
it's COVID money.
And the other thing is, it's not zero, it's attributed to coming out of a fund, but it's gonna be a cost to the fund. So that way if, and I'm looking down the road, so we need to maintain it at 19 once opera is gone. Whatever that cost is associated, it should be in your opera funds as to what that number looks like. Because sometimes we're underpaid and maybe that's why we're not getting.
Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the board chairman indicated that part of the reason for these assistants is to deal with the backlog, and that there may well be the possibility of a reduction once the backlog that was created by COVID is taken care of. So it may not be an ongoing expense.
That's not what I asked, that's what the cost. Even in opera, there's a cost.
Okay. Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Coughlin, has there been, well, I probably know the answer already, because usually when Jim comes here, he talks about the increase in terms of domestic violence cases, and that has an impact in terms of what your needs are as well, too, I understand.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the problems that we have is it's twofold. We've had an increase in domestic violence cases, and the other problem that we're facing right now is that due to COVID, there was a stay on speedy trials. So that stay has been lifted. So now we have a lot of people that are demanding speedy trials. We have a duty to get those done within 120 days if they're in custody. So that between that and the backlog due to increased domestic violence cases, those are two of the main reasons that we need additional attorneys.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
If I can still get my answer, is what I'm looking for. That cost, because what I'm looking at is, are we at the, I mean, I'm sure we're going to go out, and I'm sure individuals are going to maybe bite the bait. They haven't so far. And when I look at what we're allocating in the ARPA funds for this, there's a dollar amount. And I want to make sure that when we look at this, perhaps while the 2 years may cover us, perhaps when we look at it, we can kind of think down the road to budget a number in. What I'm looking for is that, what is the number that's been attributed to these two individuals?
Mr. Rowe.
it's the same number that you approved at the meeting. You approved those two positions and you approved the salaries. It was $70,000, or no, $68,000 for the prosecutor, $30,000 for the DV clerk, $70,000 for the ARPA counsel. Those are 2-year gigs, basically. So unless through attrition, that person moves into our general fund and becomes a member of our staff that's not ARPA funded, then those positions are eliminated when the ARPA funds run out. This is not to expand our office into 19 prosecutors. I think we're at 12 right now to begin with, but we're capped at 17. And and we always had one extra in there, right? A flex position. So if someone was leaving, you could hire someone to kind of shadow them for a couple weeks without running afoul of the ordinance. So you've already approved the 2 positions and you've approved the salaries. We just now need you to increase the number that we can hire so we, again, don't violate the ordinance. But these numbers have already been approved, not only at this committee, but also at the board.
At finance and the board.
And finance.
So that's what I was looking for. What was the number? So we'll know.
68, 30, and 70 were those 3 positions: a clerk, a DV prosecutor, and an ARPA counsel. And you're confident we can find someone at that number? We've already got a commitment from someone. She accepted it yesterday for the DV position. We have had a posting out for clerk for a while now. We're not getting any resumes. And the ARPA position is what Mr. Wheeler, Chairman Wheeler, was talking about. We're trying to work something out with an attorney. It may not be an employee basis, because who wants to shut down a private practice to come for a job that may only be 2 years? So we're trying to work something out there where it would still be within that approved range, but it may not be an employee. It could be a contract basis, which ultimately saves the county even more money, because now you're not paying the pension and all the other benefits that go with it.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, use the microphone, please.
If these positions are only supposed to last as long as the ARPA funds do, should that be included in this resolution, that those positions would be terminated and we'd go back to 17 once those funds run out?
No. I mean, there's really no purpose in doing that if any of the positions that we're going to have are going to have to be approved by this board, so that you'll still have control as to, if you don't think there should be, if you think there should be 17 prosecutors, then you only fund 17 prosecutors. But this just rather than having to come back and forth to the board and say, oh, authorize us 2 more because we have this current need, and then we go back to it. It leaves that on the books, so that's a maximum amount of prosecutors that we can have, and it just keeps the books easier.
Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second paragraph of the resolution does indicate that the number of assistants is subject to budgetary limitations set by the county board. So our authority in regard to the state's attorney's office is based on our control of his budget.
Other questions, like Mr.
Yeah, the reason I'm saying this is I think we need to look down the road, because I'm looking at that cost, and I'm looking at down the road, and I also know that they've been operating, like on steroids on the limited staff they have. So at some point, if we're going to get it covered for 2 years, which is a blessing, that we look to kind of sustain it versus decrease it, because they have an aggressive approach to basically safeguarding this community, and it is a safeguard that we need to continue to look at and not really decrease them. They shouldn't have to play, overwork a already overworked force in the future. So now that we've done this, look at the future to see, in finance or whatever down the road, be more proactive to see if we can sustain it, is what I'm saying.
Well, Mr. Snipes, I got to tell you, it's one of the first time I could ever say I agree with you 100%.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, we have a motion and a second. It's spending money. We need a roll call vote.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Snipes?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Carrico?
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff?
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstrop?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Collins?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Anything else? John?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. Up next, we have Public Defender, Mr. Pennewick. In your package, you have a copy of Mr. Pennewick's monthly report. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Eckhoff, second by Mr. Fairfield. Morning, Ed.
Morning.
Comments are on your report.
The comment is I forgot it. I reviewed it earlier this week. It was at home and out before me right now, so I appreciate that. Speaks for itself, basically. I know some of the numbers are going down. Traffic's still going up. Like we talked about, or I talked about last month. The traffic, you pretty much cut that by a quarter as to the actual number of clients we have, which is still astronomical, but hopefully by early next year, I will have at least some type of temporary stopgap to help assist traffic. I'm working on looking into hiring somebody for that position, depending on how, you know, all the logistics work out. But other than that, I've got nothing to say.
Questions, Mr. Lear?
It's not so much a question, just a personal observation. My own experience in terms of traffic recently is I feel like I've seen many drivers more reckless. So if traffic citations are going to improve that, I would be all in favor of getting rid of the reckless drivers on the road.
That's a law enforcement issue, which people should not be breaking the law. I'm 100% in favor of people not breaking the law, so I agree with that. Just to dovetail on that, which really isn't what you're talking about, but I do believe that oftentimes individual people get multiple tickets, so that's another thing that skews the numbers. You know, DUIs often carry 4 other companion tickets, but you know, I agree with you completely on that.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Snipes?
I'm looking at your traffic pending. That's like 3,875, and you closed 1,306 of those,
That's on the screen.
or around that number. So that means on the opposite side of that, there's a state's attorney that got to deal with 3,878 cases. In addition to that person doing this, there's 125 felonies they got to deal with. I guess they closed 43 of them, and then all these other cases. And what I'm saying is, in order to basically kind of reduce some of the backlog, we're going to have to look at what is feasible in order to make our justice system flow where it's not overworked with 3,678 cases on both sides.
Agreed. I know that traffic's been short on not only my office, but the state's attorney's office. I can't speak for the state's attorney's office, but you know, they have one person in 200. We have one in courtroom 200. We have one person in courtroom 200. Logistically, how do you get the work done? I mean, yes, it's a real problem, and that's where, you know, hopefully I can get somebody down there to help out my side. And again, I don't speak for Mr. Rowe's office, but I'm sure he'd want the same thing also.
Mr. Collins?
Just curious, Mr. Pennewick, ballpark, do you have any idea how many different traffic violations there are on the books? How many different traffic laws?
Thousands, probably literally hundreds, probably thousands.
Probably thousands. I agree with you. I don't know exactly. And am I correct that the lowest fine for a moving violation is $165 in the state of Illinois?
I do not know anymore. It used to be 50 when I started, then they kicked it up to 75.
I remember the first seatbelt ticket I got was $50, I believe, and now
Used to be 25
now it's $165, and that's only been in the last 16 years, 15 years or so. So to Mr. Lear's point there, that if we can write more tickets and reduce the crime, if we already have thousands of moving violations and the lowest fine is already $165, theoretically, how many different laws should we have, and how expensive should the tickets be to lower the crime rate of driving?
I'm a firm believer that we all have our own duties, and that's a legislative action. They pass the laws, they can pass them, they can repeal them, they can reduce fines, they can increase fines. You know that, of course.
With moving violations, though, if the only fine is financial, is monetary, then doesn't the punishment really only apply to people that can't afford it?
I'm a big proponent of not punishing poor people more than, you know, by their inability to pay, having them get hooked up in a collection call or things like that. It's always been an issue of mine. So in my previous job and my current job, but yeah, it's a fair comment.
I know that recently the federal government announced that the average American could not scrape together $400. They said something like 80% of the country could not scrape together $400 in a time of emergency right now. So if you were to get a speeding ticket and a seatbelt ticket, and you were a single mother trying to get your kids to school in the morning, like, what does that really do for our society when we badger people that can't afford tickets with financial burden rather than, you know, trying to encourage safe driving through education and personal accountability? Like, what's the end game of this? How many tickets and how high do the fines have to be before we actually reduce traffic violence?
I understand, and you know, that's a legislative thing. It's ironic that on felonies and misdemeanors, the fines have been reduced dramatically. You get fee waivers and so forth. The one area that does not apply is traffic, so it's ironic.
Okay, thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
Is this a question on the report? Okay, go ahead.
Well, the
Second
question
time.
on the report is on the statement made, and just basically looking at no matter what, the way people can now get out of tickets is just don't follow the rules. Then we wouldn't have the problem.
Agreed.
Whenever I get a chance.
Go.
I took 2 years of law enforcement in high school, and one of the first things that our teacher taught us was that any officer can pull over any subject within 2 blocks because there are so many traffic laws on the books. So to say that we can just avoid these tickets by obeying the law, I would challenge any person in this entire county to drive 1 mile without breaking a law. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, let's get back to the report. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Anything else for us, sir?
I have nothing.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, thank you, guys. Have a good holiday.
Up next, you have the probation, Mr. Latham. In the package, you have a copy of his monthly report. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Long, second by Mr. Kirkstra. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. Just on the report itself, as you can see, we had 2,800 successful contacts last month, 27 currently on GPS, of which 8 are juveniles. We screened, and speaking of juveniles, we screened 20 minors for detention and detained 7. We currently have 6 in custody up in River Valley. And next month I'll have a year-end total for obviously 2021. So, but that's all I have on the.
Any questions or comments on the report? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. What else, sir?
Just real quick, like a monthly pretrial update, and again, there's really not much movement on the state's end. It's moving at the pace I thought it would move, which puts more on us longer. Right now, we currently in Kankakee office have 5 of the 28 positions vacant, which means we have people doing pretrial / probation work, and they're doing a great job keeping everything going, monitoring everybody, but obviously it's tough. And I think it's going to be like this for a while. And the state level, the state, they're supposed to hire over 300 something people for pretrial, remote pretrial supervision, and they haven't hired anybody yet. So it's going to move slow. But I'll keep you posted. And when you factor in 5 vacancies we've been hit with COVID pretty good the last couple months with some positive tests, some quarantine, it's tough. It puts a lot on the staff, but they're doing a great job. But for 1 year, maybe, but when you start getting 2 and 3 years down the road, it could be a problem. But I'll just keep you updated every month, like I said.
Okay. Any other questions for Tom? Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom, how's your community service program coming along?
Going well. It's building finally. We have about 124 on that have been put on since we started in June. I think the hours are around 16,000 to 18,000 hours been ordered. What we're doing now is with COVID and the winter, it's kind of obviously slows down the need for sites around the county. But after the first of the year, we're going to really go the other side to the sites and start recruiting sites, getting it organized with different places. So come springtime, when the need for public service work increases, we'll be ready. We'll have the sites, ready, and hopefully COVID will ease up a little bit by then, and some of these sites can open back up.
Thank you.
Mr. Snipes.
Yes, one's a suggestion. You might have already done it, but I'm thinking perhaps you need to go after COVID as well, some of this ARPA funding, especially with a lot of these home arrests and them things that these individuals look like they can break and take off. But my other question is, there's a contrast comparison. I don't think that individuals know the actual dollar amount, but that it costs more when I look at it to house a juvenile than it does an adult, in that those juveniles have to still, we're still required by law to educate them, et cetera, et cetera. So not now, but next, maybe next time, January or February, could you do what they call just a cost, contrast comparison on the cost of what it takes to house a juvenile versus it would be to deal with an adult?
Mr. Wheeler.
It's adults $90 a day, if that's the rate we used. And if we have to pay their medical, it goes substantially up on the local level, and it's $250 per detention day for juveniles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's expensive. No, that's the rate we're paying for 22, like you're, Mr. saying that.
But I will say that there are other juvenile detention facilities that are about half that rate. So they're just not as close.
That'll put a burden on the sheriff for transporting.
Right.
So, any other questions or comments for Mr. Latham? Anything else?
Nothing. Drug court graduation, it's an odd time. It's December 30th. I know a lot of people are maybe out of town. At 10:30, there's only 2 graduates, and I can get that information to Kelly.
Okay.
To get out to everybody. But if I don't see you before, have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, sir. Up next, the sheriff. You should have got by email a copy of the sheriff's monthly report. Take a motion to approve that. Mr. Long, second by Mr. Fairfield. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Couple brief comments on the monthly report, and then if you have any questions, I can certainly answer them. We kind of operate both on a calendar year and a fiscal year, just budget-wise, number-wise. So some of these numbers we try to keep in the fiscal year so we can track costs. But as you can see, our transports for medical, the courthouse, juveniles, which we just talked about, have been increasing. Our transports to Chicago for both the marshals and ICE have gone down slightly, mainly because they utilize what we call the VCT video to the court in Chicago, whether it's for ICE or the marshals. So those have gone down, which has been a plus. A couple things, and I'm sure that there may be some questions later regarding what's going on with ICE. But to give you some perspective as to where we're at money-wise, in 2019, we generated $4,680,000 by housing ICE. We generated $7,295,000 from the U.S. Marshals, for a total of $11,976,000. Compare that to 2021, where this year, through the fiscal year, we generated 1.1 million, approximately, it's 1.108, from ICE, and 6.7 million from the U.S. Marshals, for a total of 7.9 million. So obviously those numbers have significantly been reduced, mainly because of ICE, which I know the chairman has been preaching like a pastor for the last couple of years. So going forward, after December 31st, I know that this committee, the board, has basically counted on 0 from ICE. So please keep that in mind. A couple things in addition to that on the sworn side. In 2020, our fatal accidents were 13. in 2021, they're 15, so they've gone up a little bit. And then homicides countywide, in 2020 there were 9, and in 2021 there were 17, so they basically doubled, which I think is kind of the trend nationwide with everything going on. So that's all I got.
Questions on the report? Do I have a motion, a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do you have a little breakdown of what the state owes us? Or
Yeah, I do. Well,
and the decrease of what they want to give us?
well, so, and what the chairman's asking is about our Illinois Department of Corrections issues with sentenced inmates. As most of you probably know, way back in March of 2020, I think it was March 26th to be exact, the governor issued an executive order that the Illinois Department of Corrections was no longer accepting sentenced inmates as they're required to do by statute because of the pandemic. Through the Sheriff's Association, we have been negotiating with the state of Illinois, somewhat of a one-sided negotiation, but nonetheless. And then in the last year's budget, the state budgeted $25 million to reimburse county jails for the housing of those inmates who were sentenced during the pandemic that they could not accept. There's some confusion as to, this is involving 3 state fiscal years now. So the original 25 million is just for one of those fiscal years. And during that fiscal year, the invoice I sent them at the negotiated rate of $70 a day was $796,810. That was through August 16th of 2021, which is when they wanted that figure. They received it on August 13th from me. There has been minimal communication between the state of Illinois. We have somewhat pushed the issue, and I guess by pushing the issue, I mean we continue to send emails asking for an update. They were auditing everybody's invoice, which is fine. I mean, they should. And so they came back and now have said, well, based on what we got from everybody, the rate's going to be $35 a day. So they have cut it in half, which ironically, when these negotiations first started, $35 was the number they came up with first. So it seems all too convenient that they've now gone back to say, oh, by the way, it's only going to be $35 a day. So we're still negotiating. We have no idea when that money's going to come. We are still trying to get an answer as to whether anything is going to be covered after August 16th of 2021, because we are still being delayed from the state taking these sentenced inmates as they're required to do. Now, understand that 102 county jails in the state of Illinois couldn't delay with the police officers of taking their prisoners, but the state of Illinois is not taking their sentenced inmates as they're required to do by statute. So it's a little bit frustrating on our end. The men and women that work at the Illinois Department of Corrections are great people. We have a great relationship with them. But their management and their administration, who I know are getting their marching orders from somebody else in Springfield, is putting the screws to every county in the state of Illinois.
And you mentioned 25 million.
That's what
statewide.
That's what they budgeted statewide, yes.
And they owe us only up to August, 796,000, and there's 102 counties.
Yes.
That doesn't add up very good.
No.
Mr. Wheeler,
Oh,
go ahead, sorry.
no.
Just a question, is this the association that's on your behalf, or is it all the sheriffs themselves?
It's both.
It's
I mean, we're all,
individual, okay.
yeah, everybody is part of this.
Well, the reason I ask is because of the $2 billion slush fund the governor just set up, that he took the COVID money that only he can authorize the disbursement of. Maybe that's a good place to get the other half of our money.
I will certainly pass that along.
Thank you.
Mr. Hunter,
Is it appropriate to pose a question to the sheriff regarding the numbers that he articulated regarding the revenue generated? Okay, I happened to go to a professional for services last week, and that person was saying that they had provided services to the inmates. My question, you posed the question regarding what are we getting, from the ICE folks and the other ones. What kind of hit is the community receiving in terms of, you got to buy, additional food and all that stuff, and the groceries or wherever you buy your food from won't be able to sell you those kind of that food and so forth. The hospitals and so forth. What kind of hit is the private sector going to experience? Or do you know that yet? 'Cause
Well,
that's another number.
I think that's probably something that the hospitals have a better chance of answering than I do, because I know that the rates that we pay and that the federal government pays are the Medicaid, Medicare rate. So I don't know that. We contract with both, we have contracts in certain things with both hospitals, which we have a great relationship with.
But that's just the hospitals, but
It's hospitals.
But the private sectors, is going to receive a hit as well too.
Possibly.
No. This, where I went is a private sector.
Sure.
So they won't receive those. They won't administer services to those individuals as well too. So
no doubt.
And maybe we need to do something in terms of assessing, what the hit would be in terms of the private sector.
One additional thing, Mr. Chairman, if I may, regarding DOC, we currently have 16 males and 2 females waiting to be transported to the Illinois Department of Corrections. Our last transport was, I believe, on November 21st. So it's almost a month. We're a month. It's about every month we get the honor and privilege of transporting to the Illinois Department of Corrections.
Mr. Collins.
Earlier this year, Sheriff, you talked about an inmate that was supposed to go to Department of Corrections to serve his sentence and ended up staying his entire sentence in our county jail. And you pointed out that we were not able to release him on his release date because he was not our inmate.
That's correct.
Has that
violated his civil rights?
Exactly.
Yes.
Has that happened to more than just the one?
Well,
and do you have a number on how many people that's happened to? Or?
So since that issue, I was the only sheriff in the state of Illinois who wrote the Illinois Department of Corrections a letter, basically saying, because what they wanted to do then after we brought that issue forward, then they would wait till that out date. So the inmate has an out date, then they would call us and say, oh, by the way, bring Joe Smith. And so I wrote a letter to Director Jeffries and the administration at the Illinois Department of Corrections and said, we are no longer, they call those individuals turnarounds, because basically they go to DOC, they get processed, and then they get released. So they call them turnarounds. That's DOC's term, not mine. And so I basically wrote them a letter and said, we are no longer providing transportation for turnarounds. If you want this individual released, you can come here and release him yourself. And so we've had no more issues. They come here and release them.
Excellent. So if you're sentenced to more than 364 days legally, you're supposed to spend that in a prison, not a jail, correct?
Correct, in Illinois, yes.
And what's the reasoning for that?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know what the specific reasoning is because it's different in every year. I know that, I believe in Ohio, I think it's 2 years in the county jail. So the numbers differ. It's just something set by statute.
In a state prison, though, are the accommodations, I guess, a little more sympathetic to the prisoner? Do they get more daytime? Do they get more free time, more access to commissary, more access to their family in a state
I would
prison?
say it depends on who you ask. I mean, we have a number of people who, because they're from here, they would just as soon stay here. But obviously there's some outdoor rec options. There's some other things that they have. Yeah, they may have some more amenities at Department of Corrections.
I've just always heard that from people that it's much, I guess, more enjoyable to be in a prison as opposed to a county jail.
Well, and I don't want to use the term freedoms, but I mean, there's a little bit more movement.
Okay.
So that's probably what they're talking about.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Snipes.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you can probably answer the question, or you might have the answer. Now that they have iced ice,
I saw what you did there.
No pun intended, but I'm just curious if they have discontinued that contract, and I guess the possibility is always there of them executing control now of maybe the sheriff, I mean not the sheriff, excuse me, but the U.S. I don't call him the sheriff. What's that name again? The marshal.
Oh, okay.
That brings in inmates here or wherever. Will they be able to then try to regulate even those, or is there something that we can? Is there some language somewhere that can prevent that from happening? And then even down the road, if they say, okay, you can't take Chicago, I mean, where does it stop? I
Well,
guess.
and that was, and I've made that argument with people before about when do they stop telling us what we can do with the marshals? Do we have to work? Can we not work with DEA? Can we not work with the FBI? You know, yeah, you're right. That's a great question. Where does it end? We don't know. We do know that, you know, there's always the option at some point that things can change, whether that's next November, whether that's in 2024, we don't know. I mean, so our hands are somewhat tied with some national and state politics.
Anything else? Anything else on the jail before we go to animal control? Up next, animal control.
Yeah, just a couple updates. We finally got our van fabricated, if you will, to meet the requirements that we need to be able to transport animals. From a financial standpoint, we did bring in more money than we spent, which is always a positive. We are in the process right now of looking at a new truck as we move forward, but again, these won't be ARPA funds, they won't be general fund, these will be IPTIP money or whatever we can do, but obviously we'll come back for approval and make sure that the board is very aware of why we need it, and I'm sure Carrie will bring that to community services as much more than here, but and right now our kennel numbers are doing okay.
I think last month you were full, weren't you?
We were full, yeah, it fluctuates, and you know, I hate to say this because it's so tough, and I know there's a lot of talk about, you know, giving animals for Christmas presents or whatever, and you know, make sure that your family's sure they want an animal if you're going to give a Christmas present. I mean, because they end up at our place, and that's, you know, that's no good. So
If the pickup truck, could you get that through the state purchasing?
yes,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. Any questions on animal control? Okay, I'd take a motion to entertain a motion to open the bids for the correctional facilities food service. Mr. Eckhoff, Mr. Long.
I received one,
Okay.
which was somewhat surprising. We had I believe 5 inquiries, emails. We provided information. They were due last night at 4:30, and the only one we received was the one we have. So, and again, we'll open it today and we'll go through and make sure that it meets what we need. And this is from, I'll tell you in a minute. Country Table, which is our current provider. The proposed per person lunch price is $1.80 and dinner is $1.95 per inmate per day. I don't think I can eat for $3.75 a day. I think I could eat $3.75 in one meal. However, it is because they fix in bulk and it's obviously broken down. So we will take a look at this and bring this back if we could move this to finance for one reason or another, whether we approve it or put it back out.
Take a motion to approve. Mr. Collins, second by Mr. Snipes. It's spending money, roll call vote.
Mr. Hess?
Aye.
Mr. Long? Aye. Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Mr. Snipes? Aye. Ms. Parker? Aye. Mr. Fairfield? Aye. Mr. Carrico? Aye. Mr. Eckhoff? Aye. Mr. Kirkstra? Mr. Hunter? Mr. Collins? Mr. Smith?
Special meetings.
Mr. Wheeler?
Might want to
Motion
mention.
carries.
Yeah, right now. Now?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I asked a question if that makes the same price for like the gluten-free or
Yeah, so there are,
vegetarian.
required by statute and jail standards, we are required to meet special needs diets depending on health issues, religion, allergies, things like that. So that's all normally all inclusive in the price, but we'll make sure that we do that, but you should know.
Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm concerned once the contract is signed with the food service, with inflation and the cost of everything, will those prices change at all, or will the quality of those meals change at all?
I would say no and no.
No and no. Okay.
Just because that's the bid, that's the number they submitted, so they have to factor that in themselves.
Yeah. It's going to be tough.
I can tell you that, and we've obviously worked with the Country Table for a number of years. We've worked with a number of vendors in my tenure, from dating all the way back to the mid-90s. And the Country Table has been far and away working with our staff, the inmates, providing, one of the things that eases the burden on our staff is food. And if inmates complain about food, they're going to complain to our staff, who have to deal with that complaint. They don't deal with the kitchen because they don't have any contact with them. We have no complaints on our food service, which is a credit to them and the work they do.
Mr. Eckhoff first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Currently, what's the price per day?
I knew you were going to ask that. As soon as I looked at the price, I'm like, I'm not sure what the price is right now. But I will email Kelly and have her send that out just send it to the entire board again. But I will get that for you. I knew as soon as I saw the price, I'm like, I can't remember what we're paying now. So sounds like three guys all had the same question.
Okay. Anything else for us, sir?
Yeah, a couple things. As I think Tom mentioned about dealing with COVID, we too are dealing with COVID, both staff and inmate wise. Inmate numbers are significantly low. Our staff, however, we've had some issues with some significant overtime with COVID. There are things we work through, and it's, we've gone through it initially. When we first got it in October 2020, we dealt with it during the first variant, we dealt with it during the second variant, and I'm sure that we'll deal with it in the third variant or whatever next variant comes out that they name. Fortunately, both employees and inmates have relatively mild symptoms, and we're just following the CDC guidelines with quarantining and doing those things, and we'll get through this like we got through the other two.
You offer a vaccine?
We do. We do offer a vaccine.
Visitors?
Yes, we do. So when an inmate comes in, we make the vaccine available. They choose to take it. We don't require them to take it, obviously. But it is available for them. Secondly, I know the board meeting was yesterday. Thank you for approving the Gray Key forensic cell phone system and our body scanner. Our investigations division appreciates it, as well as our correctional officers, so that'll be a plus for us. And just an update, and I know I'm sometimes critical of House Bill 3653. However, you know, we said all along that there are good parts of 3653 that, you know, and one of those things that we are glad for are the body cameras. Our staff has adapted to them very well. They are a benefit for us. They are a benefit for the community. And as I've told this committee a number of times, they will save us from a liability standpoint 99.9% of the time. And so thank you for those two, because and that was part of, we got in early on the 3653. We technically didn't have to do it till 2023 because of our population, but I wanted to get them going now so that we have them and we adjust to them and we can make those tweaks in what we do with them as we move forward. But they are working out very well for our department.
Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, I don't know if I discussed this with you before, regarding doing some kind of training or in-service for your correctional officers. They interface with local police departments, et cetera, and they know different rules, regulations, policies, and procedures, and so forth. Have you ever thought about doing some kind of in-service training for those individuals that may be germane to some of the testing for the local departments? And your particular department may be a training ground for local departments to segue from correctional to Kankakee City, Bourbonnais, Moments, et cetera.
You're talking for police.
Yeah.
So a correctional officer wants to be a police. So I would tell you two things. Number one, when we hire somebody, we want them to be long-term employees and make a career. However, we also understand that some people do have goals to be the police. And as far as specific in-service training, no. But we certainly don't discourage anyone from looking at testing with other agencies, police agencies, to be the police. And you're absolutely right. The advantage that we have is a couple things, and even for the outside agencies, because we do provide information to those outside agencies from the standpoint of, will they be a good police officer based on what we've seen as a correctional officer? So specific in service, no, but we certainly don't discourage anyone from wanting to work in law enforcement as a police officer.
But could those local departments make it worth your while monetarily?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they have money.
Yeah. Well,
if they have money.
Yeah, not many agencies have money. So, but it's, you know, most of the younger ones, and I say younger ones, I shouldn't use that term, but most of those entering the field in the jail, and they'll tell you during the interview, I want to use this as a stepping stone to be the police. And we're good with that. Because if you have that mindset that you want to stay in law enforcement, we feel like you're going to do a pretty good job as a correctional officer. So, you know, we're able to, just from our standpoint, and one of the things that people don't know, and during our during an investigation process, let's say there's somebody that needs to be identified. Back in the day, they would send out an internal email to all police saying, can anybody identify this person? And so one day I called and said, you know what? Why don't we send all of these to our correction staff? Because they see these guys more so than the police see them. And we have identified so many people through our correction staff of people who they knew who were in the jail. And I've said before, you know, if you can make it as a correctional officer inside the jail, you can make it as a police officer on the street. You can make that transition pretty easily. So, yeah, I mean, that's a natural progression for some, and you know, again, we want people in law enforcement to stay in law enforcement. So,
Mr. Collins had a comment.
This is actually back to the coronavirus and the way it's affected your staff and overtime. I just read yesterday that the CDC announced that this new Omicron variant, 75% of the people that have tested positive for that in the United States so far are fully vaccinated, and a third of those have had their boosters as well. And then this morning, I just read that Portugal, who is nearly 100% vaccinated, announced that the vaccine does nothing to prevent you contracting the virus, but it is supposed to prevent serious illness, which pharmaceutical companies have been saying for 6 months now, that every new variant would require an updated booster, which takes approximately 6 months, and at 6 months we've got a new variant. So you're essentially getting a booster for the previous shot. Correct. But as a heads up to yourself, I would anticipate, I mean, they're saying that this provides no defense to, so maybe anticipate on your staff having more overtime and more people. And from what I understand, all the doctors out of South Africa say that the Omicron variant's much more mild, but it doesn't seem like we're changing our CDC protocol and what we're forced into doing. So I would anticipate seeing larger numbers of your staff contract this regardless of their vaccination status.
No question. And we were one of the last jails in the state of Illinois who ended up with a case inside our jail. So that was prior to any vaccine. So, you know, I'm pretty confident as to how we're handling it. You know, we're going to get it. I was vaccinated and I got it. So, you know, it is what it is. And, you know, whether you believe in the vaccine or not is not for me to determine. I don't care. But
the headline from NPR this morning literally said, almost all of Portugal's adults are fully vaccinated. The shots protect people from serious illness, but not from catching the virus. Right. Daily infections are rising again in Portugal and across Europe. So yeah, just a heads up for us to pay attention to. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
And our guys, like I said, they've handled it pretty well. And, you know, we offered the vaccine to our employees just like everybody else.
Frankly, I think a lot of the measures that they force upon us with quarantine and the contract tracing and making those people quarantine has probably done a lot more to drive up our budget than it has to lower the infection rate.
Maybe. All right.
Thank you, sir.
All good. Oh,
Ms. Parker, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to say thank you to the public safety, because the holidays are coming up and I know they're going to be away from their families. And could you please give a little PSA about drinking and driving during the holidays and how important it is not to do it because it can have bad consequences?
Right now or on the radio?
Well, right now would be great, or you can come to the radio.
Don't drink and drive.
There you go.
No, we do that every year. Rob from the radio station calls every year. We put out a PSA on the radio. I mean, it's a great time of year, and all that does is could ruin it. So yeah, don't drink and drive.
Up next, the coroner. In your package, you have a copy of the monthly report and monthly receipts of money. Take a motion to combine and approve. Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Smith. Morning? Or after? Oh, it's still morning, yeah.
Huh?
Comments on your report, sir?
I think they speak. We're at the end of the year. We should have you at the next meeting there, probably a full detail of exactly. We're eight still got 8 pending right now, so I'm not going to give a total other than the fact is our calls have gone up at, you can see at 1453. Last year we were at 1389, so our homicides have doubled. Our suicides were up last year, but we've already had 5 suicides already in the month of December, so that's a lot, and that's just the beginning of the month, though. Other than that, some of our statistics are different than what the sheriff has, different because some of the people come from Will County, Iroquois County, and die here in Kankakee County, so it becomes our case. So other than that, the autopsies are right about a 9.2, 9.3 per month, so that's up a little bit. So other than that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions on the report? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. HVAC, air filtration system.
I'm gonna kind of take that off. I didn't get the final numbers that I needed for today. If I can possibly move that on to finance. If what it is our HV system and our air filtering system is basically down right now. We put in a negative pressure as you got through the COVID funds there, and basically that shows us at positive right now, right straight at 0 point on a positive. We need to be negative because we don't know what's coming into our morgue anymore. So it's due to the air handling units. It was installed in 2005. That has to be cleaned every month, and basically it's not working well right now. It's kind of an emergency that if that goes down, we start traveling. So we're watching that. I've had several people out there to take a look at it, and they say it's down to the nitty-gritty right now. It's too much.
Would be up to the committee, or it's up to the committee. Should we move this directly into finance end? Mr. Kirkster makes that motion. Mr. Fairfield seconds it. Is that all right with Chairman? Okay. I mean, as soon as he gets the prices, get them to finance for.
If the nature of the emergency is such that it doesn't even need to go to finance at that point because it involves health, life, safety. So we would confer with the state's attorney at that point once we have a price and the impact.
Gotcha.
So and then we'd still bring it to finance, but it's almost like when we lost that unit on top of the health department some years ago. People couldn't work there. So we'll go through the right process with the state's attorney to make sure they bless it.
Very good. You're on notice, John. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. What else, sir?
I want to thank one person that I'm looking straight at him, Mr. Fairfield over there, Ray, helped us quite a bit with a last case we had, somebody that didn't have families, and we were able to, instead of paying for it, he became the executor of the will there, and I appreciate you, all the work you did for us to help us, and I won't forget that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's an honor for the citizen you are.
Yeah. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Thank you.
All right, sir.
Is there any old business come for the committee? Any old business? Any new business to come for the committee? Any new business? Mr. Kirkstra.
Mr. Chairman, I move to be adjourned.
Mr. Carrico seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion